Lifeboats. When other ships seek shelter, they head out to sea. Hello, I'm Bettina Tietjen. Today we're going to visit the German Maritime Search and Rescue Service. Rescuing people in distress at sea in all German territorial waters as quickly as possible. This calls for perfect logistics and the latest search and rescue technology. But there would be no point without the people who risk their lives to save others. They'll be telling us their rescue stories, some at the last minute, as dramatic as any action movie, as exciting as any thriller. The difference is that the stories these men tell us are actually true.
It was spring, and we received this call straight from a Liberian cargo ship. One of their seamen was lying in the hold. He'd fallen into it and was lying there, badly injured. He was responsive, but he was in great pain. I advised the freighter to turn back at once and head back to Cuxhaven. At the same time, I notified an emergency doctor who was to sail out there with us. So we raced towards the mouth of the Elbe at full steam, while the freighter headed for Cuxhaven. And we met up somewhere in the mouth of the Elbe.
Is it possible to make standby?
Yes, of course. I will stand by.
On the way to Cuxhaven, we attended to the patient and stabilized him, so that when we arrived in Cuxhaven, he could be taken straight to hospital for further treatment. The hospital later told us that the patient had been transported very well and with great care, and we received a special commendation because he was able to make a complete recovery, even though he'd suffered 6 or 7 fractures. Some people look upon us as heroes. I don't see it like that. We're professionals and we do our job, rescuing people the way we were trained to.
Rescuing people in distress on the high seas far from the coast. Today this is done with modern rescue cruisers. Quite unimaginable for the first lifeboat cruise 140 years ago. They had to rely on rowing boats like these. With only their strength and experience to count on, they would venture out into the raging seas in these nutshells. The man at the helm who steered the boat was called the coxswain, a name which has stuck to this day for the captains of the German Maritime Search and Rescue Service, Dgzrs. Back then, it was mainly a question of rescuing passengers and crews from large sailing ships, stranded on the reefs and shoals along the coast, and to save them from drowning. If they couldn't get near them in the lifeboats, they used these rocket guns to catapult a rope to the shipwreck, so that the people on board could be hauled ashore one by one. Yes, a lot has changed since then, but one thing remains the same. Then and now, the Dgzrs is staffed mainly by volunteers, people who put their energy and their skills at the disposal of the Maritime Rescue Service, without any payment in return. One of them is coxswain Wolfgang Gruben.
It's sort of a family tradition. My father worked on a lifeboat. My brother worked on a lifeboat. People often ask me why I do it. What can I say? It's something we can do, so we do it. That's my motto, really. When we receive an emergency call, I jump on my bicycle and get to the harbour within 5 minutes. And in next to no time, we're ready to sail. In this case, a fishing boat had sent out an emergency call. They had a fire in the engine room and they were unable to maneuver, which means they were totally helpless. So we pushed the throttle as far as it would go and went to their position at top speed. The great danger when a ship is disabled and drifting towards a sandbank is that you can lose everything from 1 minute to the next. It was a really near thing. Just a little later and the fishing boat would have drifted onto a sandbank. That's how it is. That's our daily business. It doesn't make it into the news, of course. It isn't exciting enough, which is a good thing if you ask me. We're glad if it isn't always a matter of life and death.
Wolfgang Gruben is one of 800 volunteers with the Dgzrs. Without their unpaid honorary services, often risking their own lives, an organisation financed by private donations could never cover its costs. In short, without them, there wouldn't be any maritime search and rescue service, which surely is a chilling thought, isn't it? So next time you see one of these collection lifeboats, remember, every single euro helps save lives, no matter how small your donation, because the operating costs of sea rescue services are absolutely enormous. Take the fuel for the lifeboats, for example. Can you guess how much a cruiser like the Hermann Marwede needs? When running full steam during a rescue operation such as here, it gets through a phenomenal 1,700 litres of diesel every hour, and someone has to pay for it. The North Sea can be deadly, as we all know. It's generally considered the most hazardous German maritime region. In fact, the Baltic is no less dangerous, but its risks are often underestimated, particularly by the many leisure sailors and recreational skippers. So it's nice to know that the Search and Rescue Service is always at hand here too, because even when the sea is calm, you can end up in distress.
Yes, that's true. Distress situations don't just occur in bad weather conditions. They can also happen in calm weather, as in the following case. It was early autumn, with very little wind for that time of the year. The weather was clear, the water temperature 10 degrees centigrade, and the following situation arose. The Emergency Rescue Service notified us that a couple walking along the shore near Heidkate had noticed a boat drifting. The problem was this angler had got his legs tangled up in his own lines. He couldn't get up anymore, and the upper part of his body was lying in the cold water all the time. As a result, he was suffering from severe hypothermia and couldn't free himself on his own. When we arrived in Labour, the ambulance was already waiting for us, so we were able to hand him over to the land rescue services immediately. The fact that the temperatures are around 10 degrees at that time of the year in the Baltic meant it was crucial to move quickly. I think if we'd arrived a little later, things wouldn't have turned out as well as they did for the angler, so it was quite a close thing.
The heart of the organisation is the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre in Bremen, at the headquarters of the Dgzrs. Here, all the different lines converge, emergency calls are received, and all the rescue operations are coordinated. And of course, the rescue organisation has its own VHF band radio network. Looking at the vast area the Maritime Rescue Service has to monitor, you realise why all this is necessary. A coastline extending for over 3,000 kilometres, more than 17,000 square kilometres of water, and 54 emergency rescue stations in the North Sea and the Baltic. 11 of today's 17 stations in the east of Germany joined on the 3rd of October 1990. The merging of the maritime rescue services was undoubtedly one of the big achievements of German reunification. Coxswain Carsten Wassner used to work for the East German Rescue Organisation. He and his crew operate off the coast of Warnemünde aboard the Arkona.
It was a wonderful late summer day. The sun was shining with broken cloud cover. Wonderful wind for sailing. On this particular day, a hobby cat was sailing off Warnemünde with 2 people on board, a couple. Suddenly, the man fell overboard. His wife was unable to go about quickly enough to pick him up immediately. She considered for a moment and then sailed straight for the beach and informed the emergency rescue services, and the Rescue Coordination Centre in Bremen notified us. We set off immediately to start the search. Other vessels were on site, and together we organised and conducted the search for the hobby cat sailor.
Gemeinsam organisierten und führten wir die Suche nach dem Hobbycat-Segler durch.
His wife's grateful handshake. That was the thanks and the recognition we received for the job. And that makes it worth going out to sea over and over again.
Once again, the Search and Rescue Service has saved a life. A heartfelt thank you, that's all they expect in return for their efforts. German maritime search and rescue workers, it's clear that they'll be needed even more desperately in future. Meteorologists expect longer periods of stormy weather on our seas and more violent storms as a result of global warming. Going to sea without any sea rescue service? Unthinkable. I'm a long-term supporter, and you too can become a supporting member of the Dgzrs and help to ensure that German lifeboatmen continue to make our coasts even safer in future. We mustn't allow them to fail through lack of funds. Let's face it, if the Maritime Rescue Service didn't exist, we'd certainly have to invent it.